You're listening to The Wellness Project. I'm your host, Des. We're powered by Spotlight Coalition, and this is episode 103. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now, today's episode is going to be a little divisive, I'm not going to lie, because abortion has been such a hot topic in the media. I really wanted to talk with people that have had an abortion or a miscarriage and hear their personal story. It's something that really interests me. It's something that I think is important, and it's something that I think we don't really talk about. We talk about it a lot when it comes to laws restricting abortions, restricting the medications that help to pass the miscarriage, things like that, but we don't really hear the stories from women that have had abortions. As somebody who interviews people regularly and hears people's stories all day in my field of work, I think people's stories are so important to hear. So, whether you're pro choice or pro life, I really encourage you to hear people's stories, read people's stories about their experiences with either abortion or miscarriage. And you may be wondering why I'm including miscarriage when I talk about abortion, because if you look up miscarriage, it's actually called a spontaneous abortion. And a lot of the same medications and procedures are used for abortions as they are for miscarriages to help pass the miscarried fetus. So if you're talking about abortion, you have to also include miscarriage because they're very similar. Today we're going to hear from Mardalena Dawn Turpel about her decision to have an abortion 30 years ago. She talks about the difficult time she had deciding whether to have an abortion or not. She talks about how traumatic it was when she did decide to have an abortion. And she discusses keeping her abortion a secret for many years because of the stigma and shame surrounding the topic of abortion and the toll that keeping that secret had on her mental and physical health. I really hope you stick around because I do believe that hearing these stories are so important. All right, let's hear from Mardalena. Mardalena, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really looking forward to speaking with you today. So, can you introduce yourself and share your story for myself and our listeners today?
Yes, absolutely. Hello, my name is Mardalena Dawn Turpel. I'm a master intuitive massage therapist, and I had an abortion about 30 years ago.
Okay. And can you share more about your experience with your abortion? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I went to Planned Parenthood. It was all very secretive. I only told my best friend who helped me pay for it. I believe it was like $250 at the time. It was all very secretive. It was only the third time that I had had sex, and I really wanted to be a mother, but I had just started college, and it wasn't the right time for me to have that journey. So it took me a long time to make the decision. And actually, the abortion was just under the 3-month period. So the procedure itself was pretty traumatic for me. Just the feeling of my insides being vacuumed out. The loss of the child was very traumatic for me. It was the right decision to make for my future. I now have 3 beautiful boys, and we just moved into our first home. But at the time, it was all very secretive. I didn't share with anyone but my friend, and living that dual life of having that loss, making that huge decision, and then walking around like nothing had happened was very, very hard for me, and it took a big toll on my physical body. I started to develop lower back pain. I would sort of picture the spirit of my unborn child kind of like attached, still kind of attached to me on my hip. That secret that I was holding manifested itself into physical issues in my body. Actually, I got into a DUI accident from the trauma from the unresolved trauma, and that finally made me open up to my parents and share about my abortion, and that started the healing process. And then it became a big part of my story about who I was for a long time.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and making that big decision. I can imagine, was very, very difficult. And what was going through your mind when you were trying to make that decision? How was making the decision impacting your mental health?
Yes, it was very hard. I was raised Christian, which is probably a big part of the reason why I didn't share with my parents. Just fear of rejection, fear of being judged. I know that's why it took me so long to make the decision, even though it was the right one for me. It was so very hard.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is a very, very difficult decision. Well, I'm glad that you made that the right decision for you, but I can imagine that was very difficult. And so you kept this a secret from everyone besides your best friend. Was that because of the fear of the judgments? And why exactly did you keep it a secret from everyone you knew?
Definitely fear of judgments, fear of, yeah, I was afraid of claiming that as part of who I was, claiming that decision as part of who I was. It's hard, especially, I mean, well, at any time, but 30 years ago in the 90s, I sort of felt like I would be labeled with a scarlet letter. It would become my personality. It would be, it would be kind of override all the other parts of who I was and not just be, one part of who I am.
Right. Oh, definitely. And why do you think this was the right decision for you? How do you think your life would have gone if you did complete that pregnancy?
It is hard to guess about that, but I was just beginning college. I got pregnant in the summer in between my high school and college year. I pictured myself that I would have to move back home. I would have to get help from my parents, and I wouldn't be able to raise my child the way I wanted to. I wouldn't have the motherhood experience, the independent motherhood experience that I actually ended up having with my three children that came earthside with me. So, I mean, it definitely, I was 18, so it very much could have changed my whole life. I didn't end up bringing my kids earthside until I was 28. So that extra 10 years of growing and experiencing life, I think definitely contributed to. I love being a mother. I absolutely love being a mother, and I love having my kids, and I would have made the best of it, obviously, but I think it definitely allowed me to be a more stable mother when I finally chose to take that path.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to note as well that you could have made it work. You could have, gotten help from your parents, but you wouldn't have been the parent you wanted to be. Maybe you wouldn't have been the mother that you could have as you were when you were, in your late 20s, early 30s. So I think that's important to note too that not being the right time for you is also not the right time for that potential life, that potential child. It could have been a hard life for that child as well if you weren't in a stable position and hadn't gotten that education and lived that life that you were trying to live.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And I'm so very grateful that the procedure itself was so easily accessible to me, and that I was able to do it on my terms in secret without sharing with anyone. That was my choice at the time. I'm very grateful for that. And definitely think that obviously it should be available to any young woman who finds herself in the same situation.
Oh, absolutely. I fully agree. And as for letting your parents know and, finally telling them about your decision, how long after your abortion did you tell your parents?
Yeah, I think it was about 5 or 6 years after my abortion. The catalyst, I ended up getting a DUI, and the gentleman who I'd gotten pregnant with, got into an accident and was in a coma for 9 months. And that really brought to the forefront my secret because was having this second grief of the accident from the gentleman that I got pregnant with. We were no longer together at the time, but I was experiencing that grief, and it brought to the forefront the grief that I hadn't let myself process, about the abortion. I couldn't keep it a secret any longer. It bubbled up to the surface, and I shared with my parents at that time. And it was hard. And my mom said that she had some inclination that something had happened, but she had never been able, to have that conversation with me either, to approach me about it. After that, it did bring my parents and I closer together.
Oh, that's great that it had that effect, that it actually brought you guys closer. So I can imagine were you very nervous to tell them?
Yeah, I mean I had gotten into a DUI, so they were picking me up from. I told my father when he picked me up from the police station, I was crying, and because I was embarrassed about the current situation I was in. And so it was just a big confessional, just get it all out on the table. Like, these are the mistakes I've made so far. Let's see what we can do to clean that up and move on.
What was your father's reaction to hearing about your abortion?
I think my dad didn't have a big reaction. It was more my mom that we had an in-depth conversation about it. I think there was just a sadness from my dad.
Did they end up accepting your decision, or did they give you any sort of pushback about it?
Yeah, I think I mean, there was definitely acceptance at that point. There wasn't, it was, time had passed, and there wasn't the reaction that I feared. The big judgments or the rejections didn't happen. No.
Okay, that's great. That's great to
Yeah,
hear. Because I know a lot of people are scared to tell their loved ones, their family members, because of those fears of those reactions and those judgments.
absolutely.
And did you ever end up telling your partner?
I did actually. So I did tell him before the abortion. So he did know, yeah.
Okay,
And he supported me in that decision.
he did. Okay, that's great. Okay. And it sounds like your best friend was a big support for you as well.
Yes, absolutely.
What do you wish that more people understood about abortion?
Yeah, I do wish that there was more counseling involved. It's a very hard decision for everyone involved. And even if you do decide, when you do decide to get the abortion, as I did, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily happy about it, right? It's a very heavy decision that's going to change your life either way, but it's a very personal one. I don't understand why anyone else would believe that they have any part in that decision. It's your life, and I really truly believe, I was not prepared to take care of a new life at that point, and that life would have suffered.
Right. I agree. It's an extremely, extremely personal decision. I fully agree with that sentiment. And how do you think the overturning of Roe versus Wade will impact women going through similar situations as you did?
Absolutely. I'm very lucky to live in California, where we're liberal. I did grow up in Colorado, also sort of liberal, but there are conservative pockets, and it's being such a hard decision, and then to have to fight to actually get it accomplished. I can't imagine having to overcome those extra obstacles too. I probably would not have been able to do that. I probably would have had to follow through with my pregnancy, which would not have been my choice.
Right. And it would have affected the rest of your life, and maybe the three boys that you have now wouldn't be in existence.
Absolutely. Yeah. And not just my life, that child's life, my family too. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is a life or death decision, whether to have a child or to not have a child. Having a kid is a lifelong commitment. I do believe that we should be able to make that choice for sure. I fear for, like, I have all boys, so I don't know about the new generation of women but I fear for the struggles they'll have to overcome.
Mardalena, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your story. I really appreciate it. It's such a personal topic. It's such a sensitive topic, and it's just so relevant to talk about right now. And I feel like we don't talk about it enough. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you for having this conversation with me, Desiree.
Absolutely. And if you want to share, do you want to share where people can find you?
Oh, sure. Well, I'm on Instagram, Mardalena's Massage. I'm a master intuitive massage therapist based in San Ramon, California. I'm also an international best-selling author. I actually wrote about this experience of my abortion in the book Lineage Speaks from Exalted Publishing House, and it's available on Amazon.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. And everyone, I'm going to link everything in the show notes. If you want to dive a little deeper, definitely check that out. Mardalena, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Desiree.
Mardalena, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. I think it's so important for all of us to hear. Thank you so much for being here and listening to this episode. I know abortion can be hard to talk about, but I really think that hearing individual people's stories about their experience is so educational and so enlightening. So I really thank Mardalena for being here and being one of those people that's willing to share her story with us. Thanks for being here. I will talk to you next week.